Om Tavakatamritam Tapta Jivanam Kavibirititam Kalmashapaham Sharavanamangalam Shrimadatatam Bhuvinirnantiye Burida Janaha. The nectar of your words, the praise of poet seers, elixir to parched souls, delight to listening ears, cleanser of all sins is great and glorious. They who spread it far and wide on earth are most generous. Good evening, friends. Today we will continue with the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. For those that are following along, we are on page 154, and we will begin with the date, Wednesday, November 15th, 1882. Sri Ramakrishna, accompanied by Rakal and several other devotees, came to Calcutta in a carriage and called for M at the school where he was teaching. Then they all set out for the Maidan. For those that may not know, the Maidan is a huge field. It's a park, like a park area in Calcutta. And they are going there with great excitement because a circus has come to town and has been set up in this huge park. And Sri Ramakrishna was very excited. He wanted to go to the circus. Sri Ramakrishna wanted to see the Wilson Circus. As the carriage rolled along the crowded Chitpur road, his joy was very great. Like a little child, he leaned first out of one side of the carriage and then out of the other, talking to himself as if addressing the passers-by. He was behaving just like a little kid, although he was in his mid-40s. So with great excitement, he was going to go there. But to M, he said, I find the attention of the people fixed on earthly things. They are all rushing about for the sake of their stomachs. No one is thinking of God. So when he says for the sake of their stomachs, he actually just means they all are involved in their mundane pursuits, worldly endeavors, no one thinking of God. So they finally arrived at the circus. Tickets for the cheapest seats were purchased. The devotees took the master to a high gallery, and they all sat on a bench. He said joyfully, "Ah, this is a good place. I can see the show well from here." So being devotees, they were not going to try to get the expensive seats, but Sri Ramakrishna didn't mind. He was there with them, and they were there to enjoy the circus, however much they could see from where they were sitting. There were exhibitions of various feats. A horse raced around a circular track over which large iron rings were hung at intervals. The circus rider, an Englishwoman, stood on one foot on the horse's back. And as the horse passed under the rings, she jumped through them, always alighting on one foot on the horse's back. The horse raced around the entire circle, and the woman never missed the horse or lost her balance. So Sri Ramakrishna, whenever he saw or noticed something in the world, he always brought it back to some spiritual theme, just as when he was looking all around at everybody while driving the carriage, he was noticing that, well, everyone is involved in worldly life, but no one is thinking of God. And he had the capacity to see whose mind was on a spiritual plane and whose mind was sitting at the worldly plane. So just so, he's now at the circus and he sees this artist able to do these extraordinary feats. So naturally, that inspires some spiritual thought, something that he will now, using that experience, explain something to his devotees. So when the circus was over, the master and the devotees stood outside in the field near the carriage. Since it was a cold night, he covered his body with his green shawl. Now, being a sannyasi, wearing a green shawl is not a common sight. In fact, it's quite odd. So, but he didn't care about any of that. And then he says to M, "Did you see how that English woman stood on one foot on her horse while it ran like lightning? How difficult a feat that must be. She must have practiced a long time. The slightest carelessness, and she would break her arms or legs. She might even be killed. One faces the same difficulty leading the life of a householder." A few succeed in it through the grace of God, and as a result, a few succeed in it through the grace of God, and as a result of their spiritual practice. But most people fail. We don't give enough credit to spiritual practice. Not only the spiritual practice, but also the momentum that it carries with it through consistent practice. That momentum will carry us through the rough periods in our life. And just as now we have this lady, this artist that can run through all these hoops, risking her life, I would have no doubt that during the practice, when she was initially learning that there must have been falls, but yet she still got up and wanted to learn how to do this. She may even have broken an ankle at times, and yet would have to allow it to heal, just as we do when we go through life. But if we have a spiritual mooring, do daily spiritual practice, our mind will be, even when we are in the pain of recovering from some incident in life, we will find comfort just by doing the spiritual practice, because it will distract our mind from our physical pain and discomfort and elevate it to something spiritual. Either we just read the scriptures, we chant the Lord's name, or we sing devotional songs, or we just we read the scriptures, try to understand them. Well, these are all parts of spiritual practice. So basically, just as this artist must have been thinking day and night and practicing throughout many years to accomplish such feats, we should not we should use that as an example that if we can do our spiritual practices with that kind of dedication, there will come a point when whatever we do, we can't fail, because we'll have lived our life properly, and any difficulties, they will be overcome. Just as when you land on one foot, I mean, that requires practice, because every time you land on a moving object like a horse, I'm sure that the muscles will be in a different location, some will be different, so your foot has to adjust to a new landing every time. So knowing that and adjusting to that is, you can't make a mistake if you've practiced that consistently like that. So also in worldly life, we do our spiritual practices. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna says we cannot succeed in worldly life without spiritual practice. And without that spiritual practice, most people will fail, is what he says. So he's just saying that, yes, spiritual practice is absolutely necessary if you want to succeed in worldly life. So entering the world, they become more and more involved in it. They drown in worldliness and suffer the agonies of death. Well, they suffer because they have no spiritual mooring or anchors. They might have decided later in life to embrace some of that, but by then, the habit isn't there. The energy level to make such pursuits is not there. Would this lady have started doing this feat at 50 years old, or 20, or 15? So it takes, and also at that age, if something goes wrong, you heal better. If you're trying to heal something at an older age, that's much more difficult. So that's why Swami Nikhilananda says, reminds us, start while you're young. A few only, like Janaka, have succeeded through the power of their austerity in leading a spiritual life as householders. Therefore, spiritual practice is extremely necessary. Otherwise, one cannot rightly live in the world. So now, everyone has been excited watching the show and all the feats of daring, but now he's taking them and now turned that all into a spiritual thought and discussion. So he's basically reining in their excitement and focusing now on an essential teaching. So basically they are now leaving this place, not with a worldly thought of all the excitement, but now it's been sublimated into a spiritual teaching, something that they can use, following the example of that artist. The master got into the carriage with the devotees and went to Balaram Bose's house. He was taken with his companions to the second floor. It was evening and the lamps were lighted. The master described the feats he had seen at the circus. Gradually other devotees gathered, and soon he was engaged in spiritual talk with them. The conversation turned to the caste system. Sri Ramakrishna said, "The caste system can be removed by one means only, and that is the love of God. Lovers of God do not belong to any caste. The mind, body, and soul of a man becomes purified through divine love." So if one truly learns to love God and understands and experiences that God is everywhere, that divinity is everywhere, all these minor differences of caste, creed, color, how much money a person has, they won't mean anything. Those are all mundane things. But seeing divinity and recognizing divinity in all beings will be the dominant thought, the dominant experience. And so how will you be able to say that one person is lower or higher than another? Because you will see that divinity in every being, in all creation. So there won't be any of this racism, business, and God knows, every other difference that we don't like. It'll be like having, yes, there's a yellow flower, a red flower, all the flowers are beautiful. The essential essence is they are flowers, they express beauty. So also in every being, they will have their differences, but there'll still be beauty in there. That beauty is that divinity that's inherent in every being. So the mind, body, and soul of a man becomes purified through divine love. Chaitanya and Nityananda scattered the name of Hari to everyone, including the pariah, and embraced them all. A Brahman without this love is no longer a Brahman. And a pariah with the love of God is no longer a pariah. Through bhakti, an untouchable becomes pure and elevated. Speaking of householder devotees entangled in worldliness, the Master said, "They are like the silkworm. They can come out of the cocoon of their worldly life if they wish, but they can't bear to, for they themselves have built the cocoon with great love and care, and so they die there." If we are underneath our warm comforter, we feel so comfortable, it's cold outside, we don't want to get out from under that comforter. Yet outside of that comforter is an infinite world. But here we are, just like the silkworm, all cocooned in our bed, in this comforter. Life is very comfortable. Or we're in our house, everything's comfortable, good family life, we're very happy. Nothing to worry about, but we can't give it up. We can't get out of it. And so, even though there is this infinite world outside of that, there's God, there's all kinds, everything, we will not get out of our comfort zone. And so, we die there. He gives another example. Or they are like the fish in a trap. They can come out of it by the way they entered, but they sport inside the trap with other fish, and hear the sweet sound of the murmuring water, and forget everything else. They don't even make an effort to free themselves from the trap. The lisping of children is the murmur of the water, and the other fish are relatives and friends. Only one or two make good their escape by running away. They are the liberated souls. So it's very easy to follow a course of action and end up in a situation where we are now trapped. But we don't see a way out. We don't look back at how we actually got in. Just as the fish don't, they go into a trap through a narrow passage. But once you're inside, you're all crowded around, all confused, just as if when you are blindfolded and you spin yourself around and then stop, you won't know which direction you're pointing. You'll be so confused, you'll be off balance. How many will be able to say, well, yes, I'm pointing north, or I'm looking in this direction, and then take the blindfold off and actually have that be true. So also, in all the confusion of this world, how would you know to turn around and be able to go back? What is this going back? Well, we were born here through our desires and so forth, but we came from God. We turn our mind back toward God, we can find a way out. So we come back. We go back the way we came in. So they are the liberated souls. The Master then sang, "When such delusion veils the world through Mahamaya's spell, that Brahma is bereft of sense and Vishnu loses consciousness, what hope is left for men? The narrow channel first is made, and there the trap is set. But open though the passage lies, the fish, once safely through the gate, do not come out again. The silkworm patiently prepares its closely spun cocoon, yet even though a way leads forth, encased within its own cocoon, the worm remains to die." The Master continues, man may be likened to grain. He has fallen between the millstones and is about to be crushed. Only the few grains that stay near the peg escape, because they fall out of, the grinding stones are not perfect, they fall off to the side. Only the few grains that stay near the peg escape. Therefore, men should take refuge at the peg, that is to say, in God. Call on Him, sing His name, then you will be free. Otherwise, you will be crushed by the King of Death. Keep your mind always on God, on godly thoughts, not worldly thoughts, and that will be your saving grace as we get older, or even if we die unexpectedly. Keep those thoughts in our minds. So the Master sang again, Mother, Mother, my boat is sinking here in the ocean of this world. Fiercely the hurricane of delusion rages on every side. Clumsy is my helmsman, the mind. Stubborn my 6 oarsmen, the passions. Into the pitiless wind I sail my boat, and now it is sinking. Split is the rudder of devotion, tattered is the sail of faith. Into my boat the waters are pouring. Tell me, what shall I do? For with my failing eyes, alas, nothing but darkness do I see. Here in the waves I will swim, O Mother, and cling to the raft of thy name. These poems and songs are so pictorial. So while all this was going on, there was a Mr. Vishwas who had been sitting in the room a long time, and he got up to leave. He had once been wealthy, but had squandered everything in an immoral life. And finally, he had become indifferent to his wife and children. Referring to Mr. Vishwas, the Master said, he is an unfortunate wretch. A householder has his duties to discharge, his debts to pay, his debts to the god, his debt to his ancestors, his debt to the rishis, and his debt to wife and children. So what are all these debts? Well, by reading the scriptures and following their teachings, we are paying off our debts to the gods, to our ancestors. We are also, we pay off this debt by doing our spiritual practices. And by leading a selfless life. By paying off these debts, that also gives us peace of mind. But here, this man has chosen to live for himself. So Sri Ramakrishna is kind of admonishing him. He says, if a wife is chaste, then her husband should support her. He should also bring up their children until they are of age. Only a monk must not save. The bird and the monk do not provide for the morrow. But even a bird provides for its young, and it brings the food in its bill to its chicks. Now Balaram is coming to his defense. He said he's one of the disciples, Sri Ramakrishna. He says, Mr. Vishwas now wants to cultivate the company of holy people. The Master, with a smile, is saying, a monk's kamandalu, which is his water pot. It's actually made from a bitter gourd. The nature of this gourd is that it never gets rid of the smell or the taste. So when you put water in it, that water will have the taste of that bitterness. So a monk's kamandalu goes to the 4 principal holy places with him, but it still tastes bitter. So these 4 holy places mean the 4 cardinal points or places of pilgrimage within India. And there's a footnote. These points are either point 1 is in Kedarnath in the Himalayas, Dwaraka, Rameshwar, and Puri in the east. So the Master is saying, likewise it is said that the Malaya breeze turns all trees into sandalwood, but there are a few exceptions, such as the cotton tree, the ashwata, and the hog plum. So this idea of the Malaya breeze turning all trees into sandalwood, that's not to be taken literally. It's just a way of indicating that one becomes like the company that they keep. So if you are in the company of holy people, then you will naturally improve spiritually, because they will be like role models, your examples, and you will feel that you would feel embarrassed if you did not meet up to the standard of the friends and people that you keep. So it's just saying that, yes. But then there are some trees, like the cotton tree, the ashwata, and the hog plum, which don't change, even though they may be in this holy company. So Mr. Vishwas, being his selfish self most of his life, now wants to be in the company of holy people. So Balaram says, but he wants to cultivate the company of holy people as if that's a virtue. It's a virtue if you really have sincere spiritual longing, and then that company, holy company, will help you grow spiritually. But in his case, that's why Swami Ramakrishna is saying this with a smile. He's saying that, yes, some frequent the company of holy men in order to smoke hemp. Many monks smoke it, and these householders stay with them, prepare the hemp, and all partake of the prasad. So Mr. Vishwas was only there to seek some favor from the devotees, the rich devotees that would come to Swami Krishna. He did not have any spiritual desire or wish on his own. He was not doing any kind of spiritual practices to accompany any other spiritual practices. Being in the company of holy people is a spiritual practice, but not to be taken as a solo practice, because then you just bring your old self into their company. And naturally, they will feel very compassionate toward you and friendly. And but then before you know it, you are being taken advantage of, because their intent was, they had no spiritual intent. So all his life he was just searching out of his own gain and has no desire. And he only seeks his own desires when he comes into contact with holy company. And then there's a short section that, because the next day, the master had come to Calcutta, and in the evening he went to the house of Raj Mohan, a member of the Brahmo Samaj, where Narendra and some of his young friends used to meet and worship according to the Brahmo ceremonies. Sri Ramakrishna wanted to see their worship. He was accompanied by M and a few other devotees. The master was very happy to see Narendra and expressed a desire to watch the young men at their worship. Narendra sang, and when the worship began, one of the young men conducted it. He prayed, "O Lord, may we give up everything and be absorbed in Thee." Possibly the youth was inspired by the Master's presence and so talked of utter renunciation. Sri Ramakrishna remarked in a whisper, "Much likelihood there is of that." And Raj Mohan served the Master with refreshments. So here Ramakrishna is quite observant. These are the young men running the organization, doing the prayers, and trying to inspire the attendees. But the words are not sincere, because he himself is incapable of renunciation, but perhaps he felt that he wanted to make a good impression on Sri Ramakrishna, so he spoke that way. But then Sri Ramakrishna sees through that, says, "Oh, much likelihood there is of that." So I will conclude there for today. And before I conclude with the chant, there are a few announcements. Tomorrow evening at 7 p.m., Swami Brahmatmananda at our Tapovan retreat will be giving an online class on the book Toward the Goal Supreme. And this Friday, Swami Satyamananda in this chapel will be continuing the householder disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, and presently we are on part 5 of M's life. This will be the concluding section for M. This Saturday at 10 a.m. is a karma yoga for volunteers at our retreat. So for those that live in the area, they are welcome to attend, go to the retreat that day. There'll be a short talk describing what karma yoga is, and then there will be some activity, some volunteer activities planned. This Sunday at 10 a.m., Swami Satyamananda will be giving a talk here on the 11 forms of superior devotion. So I will conclude now with a chant. Om Niranjanam Nityam Anantarupam Bhaktanukampa Dritavigraham Vai Ishavataram Paramesamnityam Tvam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamaha. We salute that Ramakrishna who is without blemish, eternal and infinite in forms, who has assumed human form out of compassion for the devotees, who is God incarnate, the Supreme Lord, and who is most worshipful. Om, peace, peace, peace to all beings.